Hi, and welcome to another video note for Java Software Solutions. My name is John Lewis. Looking at the problem specification, we see that we are supposed to take the short program that's presented in the previous programming project and introduce a series of errors one at a time to see what happens. So it's not a typical programming project, but it's a good exercise in predicting and exploring the effects of different kinds of errors. Pull up my editor here, which already has it loaded up. Doesn't even have any documentation, and it's a one-liner in the main method that prints the string an emergency broadcast. So about as straightforward as it gets. So let's jump in and start introducing the errors that they list. The first order of business is to change the name of the class, capital T test, to lowercase t test. So just that change is all we are supposed to make. And the question is, what effect will that have? Well, we know that by convention, class names are supposed to start with capital letters. But remember, that's a convention. It's not a requirement that's enforced by the Java compiler or anything. However, there is a rule that says if you have a public class in a file, the name of the class has to match the name of the file. So in this case, we originally called this capital T test and put it in capital T test.java. Now that we've changed this to lowercase test, there's going to be a mismatch there, and we'll see how that plays out. So I'm going to save this version of the program. I will pull up the command prompt, excuse me, and we'll see that in this directory currently all we have is the one file, capital T test.java. I will submit that to the compiler, and it produces one error. On line 2, class test is public and should be declared in a file named test.java with a little t. So that's where the compiler enforces that rule. In this case, it's suggesting that we name the file little test.java, whereas following the convention, what we really want is this to be a capital T for the name of the class, and now it once again matches the name of the file, and we should be good to go. Note that because the compilation produced an error, no .class file was created. All right. The second error, change emergency to emergency with a little e. So the same kind of change, but this time it's inside a string. Well, this isn't going to have any kind of serious repercussions in the sense that we can ask the printline method to print any string that we'd like, and changing the capital E to a lowercase e changes what we print, but otherwise is a perfectly valid program. So when I save that and compile it, this time it compiles without an error, produces the .class version of the program, which I then can submit to the interpreter, and it runs. Of course, printing emergency with a little e, as the statement indicates. So that's an error only in the sense that if we wanted it to be producing the string emergency with a capital E, then that's a logical error of our program. But otherwise, it compiles and runs without complaint. So changing that back, I'm going to go ahead and remove, that is to say delete, the class version, because as we introduce other errors, I want to note when we create class files and when we don't. So we're back to our original test.java. The next error is to remove the first quote in the string. All right. So take out that one quotation mark at the beginning of the string. Immediately our syntax highlighter in the editor no longer claims that's a string, and rightfully so, because we've taken out the beginning of that string. So this is certainly going to be syntactically a problem for the compiler. The question is, what is it going to say? What kind of error messages is it going to produce? So let's save it, compile it, and the compiler produced 3 error messages. Let's look at each one of them. Well, on that line, the print line statement, the first error says, I'm looking for a right paren. Right here it was saying it expected a right paren to match this left paren. The issue there is that a right paren here would coincide with another syntactically valid statement in Java, not the one we intended here at all, and not at all appropriate for this kind of situation. But that's the best it could do in terms of finding this quote, or rather the left paren, and then the word an, and then didn't know what to do with the rest of this. So one error message was, I expected a right paren here. Another error is that it's saying we have an unclosed string literal. So it found this quotation, and sure enough did not match that up with any closing quotation. And we know, of course, that that's intended to be the last quotation, the ending quotation, and we are missing one here. This last version of this last error is simply that this is not a statement. It's trying its best to figure out what to do with this, and basically failing. So it's giving the error messages that make the most sense, none of which really accurately indicate what the problem was. It would have been nice if it had said, hey, you forgot to start your quoted literal here. But that's a very hard thing to actually figure out, so it gave us these error messages. Now, it did identify the correct line that the problem's on, and a quick glance kind of indicates what the problem is. We'll put our quotation back and all will be right. But it's interesting to see that those error messages weren't, in this case, particularly helpful at all. The next error that they want us to introduce is to remove the second quote, the last quote. This one, when we compile, produces 3 error messages again. But at least the first one seems to be on the mark. On this line, an unclosed string literal has occurred. It found this first one, but didn't find the second one, didn't find the closing quote before it hit the end of the line. We know we can't break quotes across lines, so it produced that error, and that really is the essence of the problem. It also is indicating that a semicolon was expected, and that it in fact reached the end of the file while parsing. The bottom line is this is another example of where this error kind of threw the compiler off, and it's trying to do its best with other statements, and kind of failing to do so. So once again, generally tackle your error messages from the top, and remember that fixing one could have an effect on some of the others. So I'll put that back in, and we are back to our original.